runtime environment, and JavaScript, on the other hand, is a language, a programming language. There is a difference between a programming language and a runtime environment. I'll just try to explain you guys. So what did I mention? I mentioned two things. Yeah, I mentioned there is something known as programming language. There is something known as programming language, or in fact, you have lot of languages. Then there is something known as runtime environment slash compilers, right? What is the difference between the two? The difference between the two is basically programming languages were introduced later. Initially, though, whenever you open any app, currently I've opened this Chrome browser. It's an app, right? So when I opened this app, right, this code was written in some programming language. It could be written either in C, it could be written either in C++ or Java, right? You have Rust, right? You have JS, right? All these languages are there. So this browser or any other app, you have basically multiple apps, right? You have Zoom, you have WhatsApp, any app that you see either on your phone or your um, PC, right? Any app is there. It is written in certain programming language, right? The question is, why do we write the things in programming languages? To know that, we need to go a little bit back and learn okay, when computers were initially introduced, they were written, the languages to communicate with the computer. The basic problem that computer was trying to solve was, it was trying to compute the thing, right? It was trying to compute the thing. You might already know okay, the earlier computers were just doing one thing, that was calculating the things. You give two numbers, 1 plus 2, 12 plus 21, right? And no matter how complex the calculation is, the computer would just give you that thing, right? So you give certain inputs. You give 3 plus 11 plus 90 into 110, right? And the computer would compute the things, and it would just do these things: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. It will compute something and it will give you an output, right? This was the whole idea behind the computer. But as the things progressed, right, even these inputs that I've shared, this was not given directly as a number. Rather, this 3 was converted into binary. What do you mean by binary? I assume that most of you already know what binary is. Binary is basically a language which contains only zeros and ones, and that's what all the computers today understand. That is either 0 or 1. And with 0 and 1, you can basically create anything. This 3 can be created as zeros and 1. This 11 can be created as zeros and 1. This 90 can be represented as zeros and 1. In fact, the multiplication signs, addition signs, subtraction or division, all these signs can be created as binary. So can be converted into binary, right? That was the thing that computer understood back in the day. And today, even if you see the most complex things today on any application, it still understands the binary. But writing binary is really difficult, right? You don't want to do all this thing, convert 3 to binary, 11 to binary, addition sign to binary, and all this 19 to binary, multiplication sign into binary. All these things you can't do, because we as a programmers, we are very lazy. So what we said, okay, we will write a language, we'll create a language which is very close to how humans understand. You might have seen some snippet of code. For example, if I want to print something, or like if I just want to add two numbers, what I do, I'll create a variable first, a equals to, I'll add those two variables, 21, or let's say 21 is the first variable, second variable is 22, and then what I'll do is c equals to a plus b. And what it does is basically it will take the value of a, take the value of b, and add both of them C. Now if I print C, let's say in Python you write print statement, right? So if you print C, this will be written. So what happens in turn is, this programming language you have written, which is very readable and understandable compared to writing zeros and ones, right? This in turn gets converted into zeros and ones, and the person and the guy and the tool that converts this language, this particular thing, into some zeros, some gibberish, right? Into some zeros once is either called runtime environment, it's either called runtime environment or a compiler. We'll soon see what is the difference between compiler and runtime environment. But hopefully this should be clear. कि भाई, the languages were introduced because humans were lazy. Developers are lazy. They cannot write all this code. And they are in fact smart. So they said, we'll create a language which is very similar to how humans speak, read, and understand. And then we'll convert that in binary. And that binary will be executed into the computer. Right? Hopefully this should be clear. One more thing, but let's say I have one app which is called Zoom in my machine. So by default, I have downloaded this app, right? So I have two primitives here. One is RAM, another is SSD. So when your app is not opened, it will reside in SSD. All your code is it will reside in SSD. Whenever you open, double click on Zoom, it will reside in RAM. It will start executing the things in RAM. So this is the difference. All the applications you download, usually SSD will be very big, right? Most likely my SSD is around 128 512 GB, right? So I can have applications up to 512 GB, and my RAM is 16 GB, right? So this is the amount of applications that I can run once in a while. And here there is another important thing. So whatever you write, whenever you have not opened the Zoom, currently Zoom is not running, so it is residing in SSD. Whenever I double click and it opens, it gets into the RAM and the process starts. Whenever I click on something, some process happens, and they do the internal communication, and it loads whatever you want, right? So this is how the things works. Here I would also like to make you comprehend the fact, whenever you try to buy a laptop, you see a lot of specifications. Two of them are RAM and SSD, but apart from that, you'll also see the cores. Okay, by how many cores is my machine is, right? It's really essential for you to know, okay, by how many cores does it have. I'll try to explain you what the core is in a moment, right? So these are your number of cores. Let's say this 4, this is 3, this is 2, right? So these are my number of cores. So you see, okay, by how many number of cores are there? What do you mean by the core? As I said you, okay, by whenever I open the Zoom, it gets loaded into the RAM. And now I'm doing certain things, right? I am executing. My meeting is also going on in Zoom. I'm doing multiple things at once. I'm opening my Zoom. I'm actually recording my session. Recording session is one thing. I am also typing at the same time, chatting, right? Sharing my screen, right? And also maybe I'm also obviously since I'm in meeting, so I'm also meeting with other people. So these are 4 things I'm doing, right? Okay, so if you are doing 4 different things, so each one will be done in separate core. So one core will be saying, "Bhai, I'll just record the session." Another core will be saying, "Bhai, I'll just whatever the guy is typing, I'll just send it to the other people." Another will say, "I'll just share the screen." Another will say, "Bhai, I'll just meet, I'll share the meeting." Right? So these are the 4 different things that is happening. So the amount of core actually represent, bhai, how many processes can a machine execute at the same time? What does the core represent? How many processes can a machine execute at the same time? Parallelly, all these things are happening. Currently, I'm speaking to you, I'm sharing my screen, my voice is audible to you. At the same time, I'm doing all these things on my browser, and you can still see that, right? This is happening because of different number of cores that I actually have, right? So what this thing is basically, this is all this thing is still inside RAM, right? But the individual things that are running are called threads. So this is one individual thread. This is another thread. This is another thread. So all of them are threads, individual threads. So what did I say, sir? If the application is closed, it resides in SSD. If you open it, it is loaded into the RAM, right? RAM has less amount of memory. But if you do individual things, that will happen in a thread, right? And it will depend how many amount of cores your machine is having. So currently my machine, let me check, even I don't know how many cores does it have. I go to task manager. Performance. If I click on CPU, here my cores, the number of cores I am having is only 4, right? The other machine I have is, it's having 16 cores, right? So it can do 4 things parallelly. So you might question here that what if I run 10 different applications? Does it mean that it will run only 4 applications, or it will do 4 different things at once? So there is something known as context switching here. Although 10 different applications are loaded into the RAM, 10 different applications are loaded into the RAM, but I see only those applications, which are running, right? What do you mean by that? Basically, loaded into the RAM are 10 different applications, but the probability of individual things happening persistently is very low, right? I am sharing the screen. The context switching basically works like this. Okay, bhai, I want to compute something. Just go to the calculator, 2 plus 3. By the time the user writes 2 plus 3, the score, particular core will be, not really used. I might have confused you a little bit. Let's say, okay, there is one core, only one core, right? This is one core. And the user has a calculator app open. Calculator. And there is another app, which is Zoom, in which he is just doing the meeting, right? By the time the user, adds something, opens the calculator, adds, writes 1 plus 2 plus 3, the time in between writing 1 and 2, this core will not be used. It will again go and record the meeting. If the only 2 things that it has to do was, okay, by whatever the user calculates, just calculate it. Whatever the user puts in the calculator, calculate it. And the second thing you have to do is, whatever the user is putting in the meeting, just record it. So 2 things it has to do. So what it will do is, it context switches. Basically, okay, I'll record first chunk of meeting, but whenever the calculator will call me, I'll just calculate whatever it has to call, and by that time I won't record the meeting. It doesn't mean that by this particular chunk of meeting won't be recorded. Basically, it goes into something known as buffers, right? A very jargonish thing. But just know that by one core can do multiple different things by context switching. So hopefully these 3-4 things are very clear. Okay, bhai, anything that is there in SSD is called program. It is called program. When loaded into the RAM, it is called process. And process can have multiple things. So each thing occupies, each thing is called thread, and each thread is executed on one core of your machine. So hopefully you guys can also go to task manager and check your CPU and check how many amount of cores you are having. So it's essential for you to, it's an important spec whenever you are buying a machine. Okay, how many amount of cores are there? Hopefully this thing is clear. Right. So we discussed what are languages and why languages were introduced. Next thing is interpreted versus compiled languages. So I to said ke bhai, what are languages? You have various types of languages. You have C, you have C++, you have Rust, you have Python, you have JS, you have what else you have? You have Ruby, you have various different languages, right? But some of them are either interpreted, or some of them are compiled languages. What is the difference between the two? Okay, but there is one thing known as interpreted language, something known as compiled language, and there is something known as interpreted language, right? The difference between the two is, okay, compiled languages have the additional thing to do before actually executing the code, whereas interpreted languages can be executed quickly. I'll take an example and explain you. Let's say I'm writing a C code, right? How do you write code in C? You write int main. You don't need to understand all these things, but if you do this thing, printf hello, right? And if I close the braces, now this piece of code. Let's say the name of the file is a.c. Let's write it better, bit.c, right? So this is a snippet of code that I have written in C. This is a program that I have written. What it does, it basically prints hello to me in a weird way, right? So now if I want to run this particular program, in my local machine, I cannot just do this thing. Okay, by, you know, the way you do in other languages, you will understand that I cannot just run it directly. What I have to do first thing is I have to compile this particular piece of code. I have to compile this piece of code. What does the compiler do? It will convert this particular lines of code into zeros and ones, and it will create another file, right? It will create another file which looks something like this, a.out or bit.out. What does this bit.out actually have? It just has zeros and ones, right? Now if you want to run this particular program, you can't run this thing directly. You have to run it through compiler. First you pass this program through compiler, so this is converted into zeros and ones, right? Once you have this bit.out, you can run this directly into your machine. So this is how the compiled languages actually work. Amongst the languages that I've shared you earlier, C, C++, Rust, and Ruby, most likely. Ruby could be interpreted or compiled. So these languages, at least C and C++, Rust, and Java, are compiled languages. Basically, they compile the code before it actually executes. Hence, also, they are very strict languages. Why? Because, sir, you can't just run a piece of code directly onto the machine, right? They're not loosely typed languages. So let's say while writing the C code, you don't need to again understand. I forgot a semicolon, right? Hello. Now I've written another line and I forgot the semicolon. Instead, I didn't write anything, right? So as soon as you would compile this particular piece of code, it will give me an error. It won't compile and give me out this particular file. It will say, okay, bhai, what the code that you have written is shady. First correct this one and then again send me as a compiler. I'll compile and then you can run to your local machine. This is the difference between, this is what the compiler languages does. On the other hand, interpreted languages work like this. What is an example of interpreted language? JavaScript. For example, if I want to write in JavaScript, if I want to print something, const name equals to Zafir, right? And if I want to print, the thing that you use is called console.log, and then you do whatever the name you want to pass, you'll pass it, and then this particular name will be printed. Now, if I want to run this language, if I want to run this piece of code, this is another program that is written in JavaScript, right? Now, if I want to run this piece of code, I can simply use the runtime environment, node.a.js directly, right? Directly. I don't need it to go through compiler, first compile it and then run it. I'll just directly run it, node.a.js, and it will print my name. So this is the difference between compiled languages and interpreted languages. What could be the caveat here? Just to make you understand it better. If I have one error here, for example, if I say console.log, and if I actually run this thing, age. So the variable age I'm trying to print is not there in my code because I haven't defined it anywhere. Name is there, but age is not there, right? Now, if I run it, what will happen is basically name will be printed, but at age, it will give me an error saying that age won't be present. On the other hand, if I do something like this here, it won't just compile. It will say, okay, there is a variable that you're trying to access, you're trying to compile, which is not there. So first go fix your code and then come back to me. I'll compile it and then you can run. So basically there are two steps here. There is simply one step. And with this, you can understand, if you want to move really quickly, you want to develop something really quickly, go with interpreted languages. Python is one interpreted language. JavaScript is another interpreted language. If you want, if you have very big code base, for example, GTA is there, GTA 5 or any other big game is there, any other big project, the browser itself is there. So go with these languages because it will give you, they are strict, but rather than for it to break in the production. It's better you test it rigorously before you actually push to the production, right? So JS is good for basically if you want to move really quickly, and these languages are good if you want to create a very big project, right? So this is the difference between interpreted and compiled languages. Here you run things directly. Here you make it go through compiler, and then compiler actually executes this code. The another thing, let me just tell you, okay, by this thing, the compiler, whatever the compiles and gives you another file. This file, you know, now you can share this particular file and send it to one of your friends, right? And when they run this thing, it will still give you the output that you expect, but they won't know what code you have written. This is the very big advantage, right? If you have downloaded GTA 5, they won't give you this particular source code. It's not open source. They won't give you this particular source code. Rather, what they will give you is this particular thing, right? So the advantage they have is basically people can just execute the code, right? But they will never get to know, okay, what the actual code is written. There are ways to reverse engineer, but probably not for a big game like GTA itself, right? I'm sure GTA is written in C. What language is GTA written? C++. Yeah. So C++ it was written. Hence you just get the final file, not the whole thing. Hence you save. You don't share your code with anyone else for them to clone. So this is difference between compiled languages and interpreted languages. Next thing we need to know is strict versus dynamic languages. Strict languages are again C, C++, Java. Why they are strict? I'll give you another snippet of code. Let's remove this thing. If I do here int a equals to 3, right? What did I do? I created a variable a, and what did I assign it to? An integer. So it expects an integer, right? Once this is assigned, can I do something like this? Can I change this a to some other string? If I'm assigning a to as Zafir, will this run? If any one of you has written the code in C, can you just explain, can this run? If I'm writing a as, I've already declared a as 3, but then I'm redeclaring as some other name. So will this work or not? Yep, it will give you an error. Why the error will come? Because you to have already said this is an integer. You cannot redeclare it as a name. So this is what the strictly typed languages actually do. They'll say whatever you did, right, stick to that. You cannot change that. You have declared it, you are supposed to stick with that. On the other hand, if you have loosely typed languages or dynamic languages, you either call it as loosely typed versus dynamic. Pretty bad with spellings, right? So you have loosely typed or dynamic languages, one of the same. So what these say, here if I declared const, let's not take const because it means it's a constant. Let a equals to, we'll get to what let and const actually means, but this is the way to declare a variable. So if I say let a equals to Zafir, then if I do a equals to 3, 4, and if I run this code, this will actually work without any error. So this is the advantage of having loosely typed languages, right? So they don't actually do the strict type casting. They don't check for your types. There is a way for you to make JavaScript also strictly typed. There's something known as TypeScript, if you might have heard. That will cover all this thing. It will make again strictly typed, but this for another day. But for now, you should know the strictly typed languages are very strict in how they work. They just say whatever you have declared once, you cannot re-declare it. They actually preserve the types. It's a good thing to know. If somebody asks you what is strictly typed, they preserve the types. What do you mean by the type? If it is an integer, keep it integer. If it's a string, keep it as a string, right? They preserve the types. On the other hand, loosely typed languages are not really good with preserving the types. So this is the difference between loosely typed and strictly typed languages. or dynamically typed languages. Next thing we need to cover is single threaded nature of JS. What does it mean? I've already explained you कि भाई the number of cores actually represent how much amount of how basically the core represent one thread it can execute at a time. Let me just take this thing and paste it here. So let's say my machine have 4 cores, which I actually have 4 cores, right? Now if I want to run some JS big program of JS, I want to execute some big program of JS. Let's say I'm doing multiple things. Console.log. I'm printing 4. I am for. Let's keep it simple. Control C, Control V, Control V. Let's change the numbers. 2 plus 1 plus 9 plus 0 and 4 into 3 into 2. So 4 different things I'm doing. So you know what will happen? No matter how much the code is big, once I start executing the code, it will always run, on a single core. It won't be like कि भाई अच्छा the program is very big, let me just divide my code into various other cores so all the things are executed parallelly instead of executing one by one. So what will happen? What is the difference between these two? Okay, bhai, no matter, even if my the code is very big, I have rented out a machine on AWS to deploy my application, right? Basically what you do, whenever you deploy application, you rent out a machine on AWS. This is like one way of actually productionizing your application. So even if it has 4 cores, only one core will be utilized, and you'll still be billed $20 for your whole month, right? So although only one core is getting used, but you have to pay for the whole $20, right? And you cannot use the other 3 cores. So this is like a slight disadvantage of JavaScript. It's a single threaded. It is single threaded, so it actually utilizes only one thread, one core. It utilizes one core by default on the browsers. On the browser, it utilizes only one core. So even if your browser is very, you will see the browsers, getting stuck a lot compared to any other applications. Why? Because the whole, mostly what you, how most websites are loaded are basically using JavaScript, right? So you are using only single thread. That means your whole browser is using only one core, right? So if you're using one core, only that particular core has to execute everything that the browser is running. So this is a very big disadvantage. On the other hand, if you see GTA or any other big application, it executes and uses multiple different cores to do different things. This way you actually save the time and also save the amount of compute you are utilizing. So this is the disadvantage, I would say, of JavaScript, that it can be it only executes in single thread by default, although you can make this as multi-threaded, but let's not get there, right? So this is the disadvantage of JavaScript, which is it actually uses one code. Now let's get into the coding. Hopefully this is clear till now. Is there any doubt till here before we move forward in any of the things? Codes, threads, program, process. All right. Let's get into the coding. But before we get into the coding, how many of you already have Node.js installed locally? Okay. Not installed. Um, in case if you don't have Node.js installed locally, you can go to this particular website called Replit. This is like an online compiler where you can execute your code. Just give me a second. So go to this web app quickly, log in, use your Google. Create an app. It's been a long time since I've used this one. Create app. I assume they didn't keep it free. They have made. All right. I assume that it's no more free. Home. If I go, what happens? There was a way to actually execute the code. There was something known as create REPL here. Anyways, even if you don't have, if you can't go there, just quickly install Node.js. Can install Node.js, right? I already have it, so I'm not gonna install it. So quickly install. I'll give you 1 minute to install it and run it locally before we move forward. Meanwhile, let me create the repository for today's class, right? So what I'm gonna do is go to my folder. I have only 4 cores, that is why it is slightly slower. Maybe I should switch to another laptop from next classes onwards. Anyways, if I go to web dev, I'll create a folder here, JS, right? I can do 2 things. Go back to web dev, opening, it's not utilized. Open in another terminal, or I can do is one thing, open in terminal, and do this thing, code space dot. What this basically does is whatever folder you have opened, what did I do? I went to my folder, I opened this in my terminal, open in terminal, right? Once I open in terminal, I wrote code space dot, and this opened my folder in my VS Code, right? Now let me just create a simple file here, index.js. So JS, any file you might already know. Okay, Python files will actually ends with .py. JS files actually ends with .js. So these are the extensions, various extensions. For JSON you use .json. For YAML you use .yaml. This is the way to so that the compiler actually gets to know, okay, but this particular file is written in JavaScript, right? So let's see what we have to cover. So let's first cover how do you write the easy bits in JS are booleans, numbers, and strings. These are also called primitive data types. Then you have some complex data structures, and then we will cover the functions in JS, right? So let's start with var, let, and const. So I assume like most of you already have Node.js installed. Should I wait or stuck? I guess. Okay, it's fine now. Do you guys have Node.js installed locally? Okay, that works, I guess. If you don't, anyone wants me to wait, I'll wait for a minute. It will be fine with me. Okay, I assume like most of you already have, so let's just get going. So let's start with the basic thing. Just close it. I assume you guys can't see my screen because I'm just sharing my this thing, browser, and not the whole thing. Right. So let me share my entire screen. And shared. Right. Hopefully now the VS Code should be visible. So let's start. The first thing you should know is how do you declare the variables. There are 3 ways to declare a variable in JavaScript. One is var. Let's start with let. So the one thing you can do is let and a, whatever the variable name that you want to declare, that is a name that you have to go, and equals to, and now here you can write number, strings, booleans, or whatever the data type you want to write, right? So let's say I'm declaring 4, let a equals to 4. And now if I want to print this thing, what I have to do is console.log. In Python you have print statement. Here you use console.log. Log basically means logging out, basically show whatever I have put inside these brackets into my terminal, right? So now if I save it, I open my terminal using control and backticks. I can close it and open it, right? I can open and close it using control and backticks. Backtick is there before your one number visible on your keypad, right? Now, if I want to execute this code, what I have to do is basically node index. Let me just write the whole thing. Index.js. Now, if I execute this particular line of code, what actually happens is this program starts running, A gets declared, right? And let me just tell you here what happened actually was, this program when it started running, now that it is executed, it's completed. But when it started executing, it got into RAM. Currently, it is residing in my SSD, right? SSD is non-volatile, so even if I restart my machine, all my content will be still visible, right? But once I did this thing, node index.js, for a millisecond, it went into a RAM, right? In RAM, now at the time of RAM, if I close my machine, all my code, whatever was written in terminal, will be lost. So this is the difference between RAM and SSD. Hope this is a very basic thing, right? So when I ran this thing, A got printed. So this is how you do it, right? Let's add few more variables. If I do let b equals to 5, and if I print this thing, and again if I use this thing node index.js, I printed b, so b was printed out. Let's make things little complex, not complex really, but let's make b as some string. So whenever if you want to write some string, write some text, you keep in quotes so that the JavaScript gets to know, okay, by anything that starts with the quotes is actually a string. Double quotes or single quotes doesn't matter. I can give single quotes, that will also work in most of the languages, right? So when I do and console b, b got printed out. So that was the thing, right? Now let's say I add one more thing, is married, and if I do false, so false or true, two things could be added here. And here, see here very clearly, I'm not adding a string. A string could be many things. The fee is software SWE1, right? I can do this thing. This is a string, but if I'm just writing true or false, it's just a boolean, which actually means if I print this thing is married, what actually happens is it actually prints true, because I'm trying to print this particular variable and it says true. This could be used in if else statements when you want to trying to find out कि भाई, based on some condition, if I want to print something, right? Let's get into if and else. Guys, just give me a second, my mom is calling. All right, let's just continue. So I was saying कि भाई, if he is married, if his married is true, and then console.log happy marriage. And if this is not true, else, right? If this is not true, then do console.log single, not really single, best of luck. Now if I execute this thing, what actually happens? Happy marriage. Because why? Is married is set to true. If I set it to false, this code is again executed and it checks is married, and this particular variable actually has false, so this piece of code gets executed and this is skipped. So this is the difference between if and else. But here we can have other type of variables as well. you might know, okay, by if I declare something as Zafir, this is a string. And now if I redeclare the variable a as, I don't need to use let again. I can use a and set it as 4. Now if I do console.log, the output will be 4. And what actually happened was this a string was initialized as string Zafir, and then I redeclared as 4, and then this a was printed and it actually got printed as 4, right? On the other hand, if I want, by something that I have declared should not be changed, so I can use here Zafir. I'll first print it out. Now if I run it, Zafir gets printed, right? That's good. Now if I redeclare Zafir as 3 or 4, now if I print a, what will happen? Can you guys imagine? It gives me a runtime error. It says, see here, Zafir gets executed because JavaScript is executing, Node.js is executing the code line by line. So the first line gets executed, second line gets executed, third line it gives me an error saying कि भाई assignment to a constant variable is not allowed. What did you declare initially? You said कि भाई this thing is constant, I cannot change it. I cannot even change to some variable. I cannot say then and save. Again, I'll get an error because I'm trying to redeclare it. You cannot redeclare the constant variable. So this is the difference between let and const. Last thing that is left out is var. To understand var, we'll get to var. What is the difference between var and let? Basically, they are very simple and similar to let, right? Here also I can declare Zafir. Forgot the variable, giving the variable name, right? Now if I do console, and now if I print name, and by the way, whenever you're writing something in console.log, you can write in various ways. I'll change the name to some other thing. I'll say first name, right? Now if I want to say write something, first name is, I can write first name is. Now if I want to print first name, what I can do is basically add here comma first name. This is how you do in Python as well. Now if I run it, it shows first name is colon Zafir. The other way around is basically you can also add the plus sign. This is how you do it in Java, right? Okay, but this string you concatenate with this particular string or this particular variable. Now if I run it, again it runs same. Now if I want to add something else, var age equals to 4, 22, right? Now if I want to print age as well, I can concatenate it with other strings as well, and age is plus age. So there are basically various ways to write the string. One you can do is add plus signs, or you can use comma. It does the same thing. So there is no difference between comma and plus. It basically just concatenates your whole string. Hopefully that is clear. Now to understand how var is different than let Newton, what do you call it? Let g equals to 9.58. If I'm printing something like this, I'm not consoling anything. Console.log g, right? It also gets executed exactly the same way. So what is the difference between var and let? Let's try to understand that. Basically, let me add few variables. Variable let married false, let is male true. Now I'm writing some complex function. If is married, and if I close this and open this thing and console.log you're married, so this will be printed. You can to check in if condition, you can do two things. If is married, if I'm doing, basically it checks if is married is true or not. The other way around, I can clearly specify if is married equals true. Then you do this thing. Then you do console.log you are married. So both of them does exactly the same thing. If is married is equals to false, you are not married, right? This is the thing. Now let's say I'm declaring here few more variables. Where I'm declaring two variables. In fact, I'm doing is male. It's already declared, so let me just remove this from here. Add here is male true, and I'm adding here one more thing, where age is equals to 22. Now what will happen? See very clearly. I'll print both the things. What will print? I'll print both male and age. So console dot log is male, and I'll also print console dot log age. So this might be a little jarring. What did I do? I created a block of code, and inside that I have added two variables. One I have added Ismail, I have declared two variables, and I've added age, right? So I'll first print Ismail, I'll first print age, and then I'll print Ismail, right? This is what I'm doing outside of the block. Now if I run this thing, what did it do? It said, Keba, you're not married. It means it went inside this block. It declared these two variables properly. When I came out of the block and console.log as age was the printed. Age was printed, but Ismail was not printed. The reason being, in fact, you might see the VS Code here made this particular variable little bit dark compared to this particular variable, because it said, bhai, the mail is not being utilized, right? Whatever you write in let, it is block scoped. It is block scoped. Okay, bhai, you can, whatever you write, you can just utilize here. If I console it here, it will run here. Mail is mail. Right now, if I run it, remove the last line, comment it out. If I run it, it says you're not married. It went here, is male, true, where age 22, console.log male is true. So here the male is getting printed, but if I print it here, it gives me an error. It says is male is not defined, because whatever you declare in let, it is just block scope. मतलब ये block में आप declare करें, so you can utilize only here, not anywhere else. So hopefully that is clear, the difference between var and let. And const is something that you don't want to change throughout your code. Next thing, you have numbers. We have already covered. Booleans we have seen. Strings also we have seen. If and else also we have seen. Next we have is something known as loops. For example, let's say if I ask you, can I print all numbers between 1 and 100? 1 and 100. So the naive way to do that is basically console.log 1, console.log 2, console.log 3, console.log 4, and you keep doing till 100, right? Is this the good way to write the code? No, right? Because you don't want to write 100 lines of code if you want to do something. This is the whole idea behind programming, right? You try to make a generic program that runs for all of your use cases. In this case, we introduce here something known as loops, which are there in all the programming languages, right? Now bear with me for some time. If you're writing it for the first time, what do you do? For let I equals to 0, I less than 100, I plus plus, and I open the curly braces. Here I can write all the code. Now if I write console.log as I, and now if I run it, this runs and all my numbers from 1 to 100s are printed. What it basically does is you initialize the variable. कि भाई आपको कहाँ से print करना है? I'm sure 0 is also printed because I have initialized from 0, but the assignment was to start from 1. So I'll start from 1. कि भाई कहाँ तक print करना है? I'm sure it goes only till 99. So if you are giving the greater signs, so it says कि भाई 100 से कम, less than 100, so it will just go till 99, and 100 is not printed, right? 100 is not printed. If you want 100 to be printed, you can do two things. You can add this to 101. 100 is also printed. The other way around is what you can do is less than or equals to. And now if I do this thing, okay, less than bhi raha ya equals to bhi raha, go till 100, right? The last thing is I plus plus. Here I can do multiple things. I want I plus plus basically means add one variable once you loop through console.log. So what actually happens? Let I equals to 1, I less than 100. This condition is true. It goes inside the block. It executes this for the first time. Goes again. Now, no, before going again, I is incremented to 2, right? Now I is 2 and checks is the condition true, I is 2, still less than 100, yes, go inside, execute it, go until you actually get I as less than or equals to 100. Once it gets to 101, it again goes and it exits out of your loop. So this is how the loops actually work. Hopefully this is also clear. We have one assignment here, probably I've added. Write a program that checks if a number is even or odd, right? This should be very simple. Let's just add it here. I'll add the number, let number is equals to 29 if number modulo 2 equals 0, then print console.log it is even number. What did I do? The goal is to check if a number is even or not. So what did I say? I have put this condition कि number modulo 2 basically means कि if I divide this number with 2, what is my remainder? So if you divide 29 by 2, the remainder that you get basically is 1, right? 28 gets slashed and 1 is the remainder. If you divide 23 divided by 2, the remainder you get is again 1. If you divide 20 by 2, the remainder you get is 0 actually. So you are checking if the number is divided by 2 is correct, then print even. Else, if it is not even, then print odd. I can add here number as well. Whatever number you are adding, just say that number is even, number is odd and all. Now if I print it out, it's very bad way of printing. Why? Because I need to give some space here. Let's give it some breadth. Okay, but 29 is odd, right? 29 is odd. If I change some number to make it 32, 32 is even, right? 32 is even. So this is how if and else's works. Hopefully this is clear. Let's get to the next slide. What we have, all things are covered from here. Now the important bits are arrays and objects. Most likely, you guys might already know arrays and objects. There are various other data structures here. Hashes are there, hash maps are there, mapping is there. But the important ones to know are arrays and objects. So that is the reason why we are covering. Even today, if you are productionizing your code, most likely you'll be using arrays and objects. That's it. You don't need a third data structure. The way you see in data structures and algorithms, ke hashes are being utilized, trees are utilized, graphs are utilized. You don't need it until and unless you are creating a project which has to be scaled for 100 million users. LinkedIn uses graphs and trees, right, for connections and all. Facebook uses. So until and unless you're not scaling for that level, you're good with arrays and objects, right? So let's start with what array is. So let's say if I want to give set of numbers, so I can use it using this thing. I give square brackets and I add all the numbers using separated with the commas. Now if I want to console it out, I can do this thing, console.log a. What will it print? Will it print line by line? No, it didn't print me line by line, but exactly it printed whatever I have declared. But now let's say if I want to print it line by line, what I can do is for let I equals to 0. Why I equals to 0, sir? Because my index for an array always starts from 0. So this is my 0th index, this is my first index, this is my third index, this is my fourth index, this is my third and fourth, right? So this is how it goes. So I'll start with 0 and I'll go I to be less than the length of the array, because I want to go till the end of the array, right? So I'll say I dot length. A dot length will basically, A is my data structure, that is an array, and dot length, if I print just this thing out, right? If I print console dot log not a, but rather a dot length. What it will return me? It will return me 5 because there are 5 elements inside my array. If I add one more element, it will print 6. So this is how a dot length will represent. So I have this thing, then I have I plus plus. Now, if I want to print at individual lines, I can do this thing. Console.log. This is important thing. I'm not directly printing A, but rather I'm using square brackets to represent the index of that particular array. So what actually happens is here is basically I starts with 0. I will check the condition that I has to be less than the length. Length is my 5. Yes, sir. 0 is still less than 6. Right? It goes inside the loop. It prints A of I. A of I basically means that go to the eighth array and print the ith element. The ith here initially is 0. So it prints 1. Right? And then it goes to 2, 3. Let us just execute this code and see. Right, so it executes 6, start with 6. Why? Because this is just the length of the array. Let me comment it out. Now we can see 1 to 6 is printed, right? So it checks the length, it increments it, and this is the way to access the element inside the array. Hopefully this is clear. Do we have any assignment regarding this? Write a program that prints the all even numbers in an array. So let's do this thing. What is it saying? Const a equals to, you have set of numbers, some gibberish, 132, 112, 115, 16, 17. These are the arrays. Now my goal is to print all the numbers which are even. For that, again, first I have to do is I'll first get the length of the array, right? Const, because this will remain constant, a dot length. If I print this thing, if I print this thing, it will print 5 because I have 5 elements inside my array, right? I got my length. Now I need to write an loop for let I equals to 0, I less than a dot length, because I already have the length inside my length variable, and then I plus plus, because we want it to be incremented by 1 only, right? Now I'll put a condition. If I just put it here this way, console.log a of I will print the individual elements. It will take and print the individual elements, but I don't want this thing. Rather, what I want to check here a condition. If a of I, basically the individual element, modulo 2 equals 0. This is the condition to check if a number is even or not. Now I'll print console.log and I'll print exactly the same element, not the a, but rather the element this loop is holding at that particular time, right? Now if I run it, only even numbers are printed inside the array, right? So if you have lot of data inside a data in an array, right, if you want to print certain things, you use an array to structure the way, right? You don't use an individual variables, right, to check the condition. Rather you use an array, right? Hopefully this is clear. Next thing what we have is objects. Let's say if I want to talk about myself, so what is my name? About student, some student, right? Hassan is there, and his age is hopefully around 20 or 21, right? And his student is true. Okay, so these are the 3 things about Hassan. Now if I want to write this thing, console.log, and now if I want to do this thing, if age is greater than 18, let me close it in brackets, then I'll say eligible for license. Now what it will do, it will check okay, by the age of whatever variable you have assigned is greater than 18. So just say okay, he is eligible for license, and we will also add the name here. Okay, by name, I'll change the name because name was earlier used as a inbuilt variable. name student plus or comma, both works. Hassan is eligible for license, but there is another person, right? His name is also something else. Let's say his name is Fatima and her age is 18 or 17, let's say. So what will happen? Basically, it will check for this particular student. I want to check for in all the individual students. So what I can do is basically, instead of keeping them as individual variables, I can use something known as object. What object does is basically this thing. Okay, by const student one equals to not the square brackets, rather curly braces. So this represents the object. First thing I want to write is a name. Let's not write the name because it is deprecated. Use some other variable. First name. Right now in the codes I can write the name Hassan. I need to add one more thing regarding Hassan. His name is Ali. His age is 20. Is he a student? It's true, right? It's true. So this is how I have written Hassan's object. So anything now, if I want to print anything regarding Hassan, the student one rather. Now if I do console.log, if I print the whole thing, let's see what will happen. One more thing, important thing, even if you write the semicolons at the end or not, it will still work. Why? Because JavaScript is loosely typed language, right? So it prints me exactly the same thing. It prints first name Hassan, last name Ali, age 20, and is student true. But let's say if I want to print only individual element of Hassan, so what I'll say, student1 dot first name, just print that to me. It will just print first name. If I say last name dot last name, it will just print the last name. If I say is student, just check if he's a student or not. It will just print one thing. Hopefully this is clear. This is how you access the elements inside the object. But now let's say we have another student, and this is Mujtaba. That is the right spelling. And his age is 21. He's a student. He's not a student. Let's say it's for namesake. Now let's see. Let's say I want to check for both of the students. Okay, student 1 and student 2. If they are student, just say कि भाई they're eligible for masters. If they're not student, just say कि भाई they're not eligible for the masters. So what I have to do, I have to write a condition. If student1 dot is student is a student is eligible for the masters, for master or scholarship, whatever you want to say, right? What will happen here? I am saying कि भाई if student1 is student, what will this do? Basically this will check if this thing is true or not, then execute this thing. The other way to do is a more cleaner way is writing it this way. Okay, check if the value of student1 dot is student is true or not, right? And then print this thing. Now what will happen if I run this thing? Hassan is eligible for master. Now if I want to check here, I can do one more thing here. Else if it's not student, is not eligible for master, right? This is what I can write in else condition. But now let's say if I want to check for student 2 as well. So what do I do? So should I copy this thing, paste it here, and check for student 2, and change it here to student 2, and again here to student 2. Now if I run it, it says Hassan is eligible for master, Mushtaba is not eligible for master. But this is a very nice way, right? It means as many objects I am creating, just write as many lines of code. Very important principle of coding is try principle. You might have learned in your software principles. It basically means don't repeat yourself, right? Don't repeat yourself. So how can we mitigate this thing? We can say as many students you have, instead of writing them in individual student, you write an array students and add student 1 and student 2. Remember what is an array? It's a data structure of similar types, right? So you have two different objects. It have different values, but the properties are same. So I've just added them in an array. Now I can write only one piece of code that is not getting repeated. So what I can say, for let I equals to 0. Now I need to loop through the array of students. I equals to 0, I less than students dot length. Students is an array. I need to go through the whole of my array, and I want you to increment it one by one, so you can check for individual students. Now here, if I just print it out, this thing, right? Student, let's say I am just printing out students of I. What will happen? It is printing the first student and the second student. But let's say if I just want to print out the first name of the students, so I can do dot first name. Now what it is doing, it is just printing the first name of individual students. It's not printing the whole thing, right? So this is the thing. Now we are making things little complex. What it is basically doing is, it is going to this array, it is going to this index. At the moment of execution, it will be 0. Student of I, this is the way of using or picking one of the element in an array. Inside that, I have this particular thing as an object. So to access one of the properties, I'm using dot first name or dot last name, or whatever the way you want, right? Now I can write very simple line of code here. I can check here. One thing I can add, if students, what am I writing, sir? Is student equals true, then do this thing, sir. Then you say कि भाई ये वाला जो student आप पकड़ के लाए, he is eligible for masters. Why? Because he's a student. A student is true for scholarship. Else, if this is not true, then you just print console.log is not eligible for scholarship. Now if I run it, what will happen? Hassan is eligible for scholarship, Mushtaba is not. Let me add few more students. Then student 3. See how it gave me the reds quickly right here. I've tried to create another variable, redeclare this variable student2, right, in the const. So this is not allowed. You cannot redeclare a same variable, right? Anyways, so let me change this to student3, and now if I change it to Vyas Balbis, right? Now his age is 21. This is student is true. Now I need to do this thing. If I run this, it won't give me, it won't check for Vyas. So what can I do here? I can add student 3 also in my array object, because it is just going to student 1 and student 2. It's not going for student 3. So if I add student 3 now, we'll check he's eligible for scholarship. So this is how you actually play around with objects and arrays. Hopefully this is clear. How you create an array, how you create an object, how you access the individual elements of the object, right? Do we have something else to cover? Write a program that prints. Okay, you guys can take this as as your assignment for next week. Write a program that prints largest element in an array. What does it mean? It means कि भाई I have an array, right? Print the largest element in this array, right? Using JS, obviously. It's very simple. Try to take the harder example. It's always good to do DSA. So if you want to choose the harder examples, or actually learn or take the harder examples, you can go here. Solve problems on array. Go to easy bits. Try to solve all these things for next class. It's always a good practice for DSA. Because once you do DSA, it's something. Once you come into the placement, you'll understand that any company you try to get into, the first thing they'll ask, it's like a filtering criteria that DSA will be asked. So let me just share this particular sheet. So if you are doing the whole sheet, it's good enough for you to get into any company. Like at least you will clear the DSA round. right? Again, you need some web dev skills or something like this to um, get into the company, right? Hopefully that is clear. So the thing is, print out the largest element in this array. This is the first thing. Next is you create set of people, write their first name, last name, age, and all these things. If they are male, if their age is less than 20, greet them certain way. If they are female, if their age is less than 20, greet them certain way. If they're male, if their age is more than 60, greet them in certain way. So try to create an object and try to create a very complex things. Try to play around with all these things. So that's it from today's class. If you guys have any doubt, go ahead and shoot in the chat. It's fine. Anything else, sir? So we'll meet most likely next week. But the thing with the next week is Ramadan is starting on Saturday, I assume. So it will be difficult to take the class on Saturday. We'll take the feedback. So what Hassan, we were discussing was, so I was saying this thing, okay, we'll record the sessions and we'll upload it on Fridays and Saturdays, and weekly once we can meet in person or we can take a live class to clarify the doubts if we have any doubt. Most likely we'll go with this way from next week onward. Yep. If you guys don't have any doubt, Arim, I'm in fourth year currently, 4-2, right? Pursuing CS from the same college, obviously. I started my internship in last year, 2024 May, right? And then I worked there for 6 months. Now I'm converted as a full-time employee there. Basically, I'm working as a computer vision engineer there, but I've mostly worked throughout my journey for 6-7 months. I've mostly worked on MLOps, which is like working with Kubernetes, Docker, and Prometheus, Grafana monitoring tools, deploying the applications. This is what I've been doing for all these months. Basically, we are building a low code no code platform where people can actually come in, train the computer vision models, right, by just clicking few set of buttons. You can in fact use the LLM, okay, train this particular model for me, this is my data set, right? So you don't need to actually write any sort of a code, and you can do bunch of other things. So the part I am handling is the complete MLOps part. Okay, whenever you start the model training, that model training will go into Kubernetes and individual pods are created. Little jargons, but that's what I'm doing. How did I get the internship is basically I joined this cohort in November 2023 of Harkirat Singh. I worked for, I guess, 3 months. I've intensively worked learning the web development in general, right? I got few projects on hand, right? And after doing 2-3 projects, I was selected there. Let me just share you my resume for how, I mean, what my resume actually looked like if I have at that time. Maybe I have, maybe I don't know. So I had 2 rounds there. The first round was basically DSA and a lot of technical things. I basically did React, Recoil, state management libraries. I deployed my application, right? Used Docker, understood Docker, how Docker works. I learned what is forward proxy and reverse proxy. So these were 2-3 things that I learned really well. Created 2-3 projects, and then I was selected there as an intern. Okay, I have got my resume. Hopefully I will be able to share. Right, let me share you with you. entire screen. Things have changed a lot. I mean, since then, because the way AI is picking up, you are expected to do things very quickly compared to how much amount of time it used to take earlier. Right. So this was my resume at that time. Obviously, it has changed a lot since then. But this is what it looked like. These are my skills and tools that I've used. Chat app I've created, AI history bot I have created, Paytm clone I have created, right? And all the boldified things you can see, those are the technical jargons that I've used in my application. Socket.io is there. JWT we will be covering, Prisma will be covering in our bootcamp, Express, Tailwind, Recoil will be covering all these in our bootcamp, right? So yeah, this was the thing, man. Anything else? All right. I think we can take a. Is DSA required for everyone? Yes, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever you say. Whenever you are doing DSA, whenever this is the way more enough. If you are doing DSA till, you know, till strings, this is well enough for you to clarify, clear any round, unless or until you are not, targeting FANG companies, that is Facebook, Amazon, Google, Netflix, and this thing. Till step 5, it is really good for you to understand, comprehend, and solve any type of a problem that comes to your way. This is what I've seen. Basically, DSA is asked in various companies in different ways. You have FANG companies which ask it this way, कि भाई you go in very depth. There are FANG companies जो बहुत ज़्यादा डेप्थ में जाते, जाके जो मतलब you should know trees, you should be well versed with how graphs are written. And then you have mediocre companies which is service based, or startups. They don't care about your this thing, DSA. These companies, in this companies, FANG companies, big MNCs, you can get in by just doing DSA at a very high extent. But in these companies expect actually to start providing the value from the very first day. So you don't they don't actually give you the breadth of कि भाई आके सीखो पहले फिर सीख के you start executing the code. So these companies do DSA really well. Here, if you want to get in, just do DSA a little bit and you'll be fine. Because here the main thing that they say is what is the value that you can provide as an employee from the day one. So web development is one, AI, ML, NLP, LLMs boost is there. There's something known as AI agents. If you guys might have heard, there's a lot of hiring in this thing. If you are really well versed with how to create AI agents, you'll probably get as an intern in any of the companies. Um, from which platform to learn DSA? Should we buy paid course? I can learn everything for getting into FANG companies. Any suggestion? See, for FANG companies, you need to go really hard. The thing is, DSA can be learned in various ways. There are two motivations to learn DSA. One is to get into some company. The other is just I want to learn because for the namesake, I want just want to understand ke bhai, how data structures and algorithms actually work. If you are in that position, ke bhai, I'm not really needed to learn DSA for getting into the company. So there is one course in Coursera by this guy, forgot his name. Uh, I'll share that one. That's really a good course. I also started learning from there, but what I felt was, I was not able to connect with the instructor, right? That is the reason why I've stopped learning from there. If you want to see videos, it is clearly available. If you go to this particular person, what his name is basically Striver. See Daisy. If you go to this particular channel, in fact, even if you go to this website itself, take you forward, it contains all the essential problems that you need to do for to learn DSA. For each problem, they have this thing, learn the basic. If I go here, They have, if I open an individual problem, they have the video for this thing. They have practicing thing, the difficulty, all these things are there. Article is also there. So I found this very valuable compared to any other course. So they also provide the premium one, but honestly, you don't need, even if you want to get into FANG, you don't need to buy any course, especially for DSA, until unless you are buying some course for acquiring some skill. But this is all available free on YouTube. So if you do till all the way till end, you should be good enough. But the problem is, my friend, the things are changing. As I said you earlier, FANG companies are also now, just based on DSA, they are not hiring you. They are saying, okay, what else, what other things are there apart from DSA. For FANG companies, you need to go all the way till down. Graphs you should know, dynamic programming you should know, right? All the algorithms you should know. So I assume, okay, if you do all these things, tries dynamic programming, it should be good enough. There is one more thing. If you really want to understand DSA and go in very depth, you start here, complete this whole thing, and there is something known as, and obviously lead code problems you have to do. There is something known as coding chef. This is where different types of programmers from all around the world will come and practice with you. It is competitive programming. There's something known as CP, competitive programming. So different types of people will come here, and in real time you have to write code along with them. So if you are really well versed, try your shot here, and here you will be getting ranking and rating. So if you get the rating, and if you are in top 1,000 in the country, or top 10,000 in the country, so that's a good thing to add in your resume. That gets you very highlighted while getting selected into any other company, right? So if you're done with this thing, DSA, basic DSA, go to this thing, go to this website, try to compete, get your rank as above as possible. In fact, let me just share you this thing. The way how currently the LMs are inquired, or actually get to know, okay, how good an LLM is. They put the LLM on this particular website, okay, compete as a normal human. And one of the LLMs, I assume DeepSeek, got into the top 40 or 50 people in the whole world. That's insane, right? So that's how the companies actually judge you. If you're really good in DSA, come here. That's a good thing. But if you really want to get into, what about lead code contest? Yeah, man. Sort of a same thing. You can add into the your resume that as well if you have won any contest. But the better one is a more internationally recognized one. Lead code is also recognized, right? But that you cannot add as an achievement, I assume. Here you can add, because here's where you feel the heat. A lot of people from various different backgrounds will be coming here. So this is how you get into. If you get it here, you'll be fine. What is the scale? Yep. Good question. The thing is, web dev won't be same obviously in the next few years. Not even in the few years. Next 1 year. You can go to this if you want to really quickly create a website. You can go to this particular website called Bolt Dev. Bolt.new is there a website. Here, in fact, you can create the whole website just by writing the prompt, right? Build a new app with Expo. Let's say if I do this thing, sign in. Yeah, so just to answer your question, things are getting very easier for the web developers. But let me just tell you, no matter how much amount of things, the AI is doing, there will be the company who will be hiring, okay, we need that front-end engineer, we need that back-end engineer for sure, right? It depends. If you are a front-end engineer in React, if you're really good, you should be fine. So try to pick one niche and go in depth instead of hovering here and there. That makes your chances very high in getting hired into some company. In fact, OpenAI also has shared previously, I guess last week, Sam Altman shared a tweet that they are hiring for front-end engineers. So you might question, and that too for 350K USD, right? So that's insane. In fact, they are they themselves are the pioneers of AI, but they still need a front-end engineer, right? So that is the thing. So no matter how much AI comes into the picture, the problem will be कि भाई the way you are the way you code will be very different. Earlier, you would be given a lot of time in a company to code things out. You'll be given a task और बोलते कि भाई 3-4 दिन के बाद करके लाओ अच्छे से. This was the thing. But now the things are moving very quickly. You have to ship things out really quick. It is not the same as it was earlier. DSA versus dev, man, don't get into these niches. Actually, just focus on both the things. Both are important. Unfortunately, both are important. You cannot just expect a job by doing the whole of DSA. As I said you earlier, now companies also want a front end engineer, a back end engineer. If you are in 2020, if you are just good in React, you are a easy hire for any MNC, right? Any startup, right? But now the things are not same. DSA, just understand this thing. DSA is required. It's a filtering criteria. It's not something that you are judged on. It actually checks ke bhai, how good your logic is, how good you can understand the problem, and how quickly and persistently and efficiently you can solve that particular problem. This is what the DSA judging criteria is there, right? कि भाई अगर ये बंदे को मैं प्रॉब्लम लाके दे दिया, कोई भी दिन एक कोई भी चीज फट गई, so how quickly can you actually solve that problem? That's what DSA judges you. ठीक है? I'll tell you honestly my thing. I've cleared various interviews, but I've just gone till this thing, step 5 basic, and that too I did after clearing the interviews, right? Because most of my interviews I would be just given कि भाई ये करके दिखाओ, reverse an array. This is the very simple thing, but create a double-ended matrix and all this thing. So I would just put my brain in there and try to solve it, and it would get solved honestly. So think DSA from this side. Open any lead code problem. If you could solve any hard or medium problem, you don't need to do DSA. Just focus on web dev or any other niche that you want to focus. But if you couldn't solve it, then start doing this thing, because DSA also builds your logic, right? Don't try to just put in chat GPT and try to solve it. One more important thing here is try to do it consistently. Do it daily. Keep 1 hour daily. That's important. Rather than chewing कि भाई मैं हफ्ते में एक वक्त करता हूँ लेकिन पूरे problems कर देता हूँ, that won't open your brain. But rather doing daily for 1 hour, just for 1 hour. I would do this thing when I was initially doing DSA. I would say कि भाई I'll just give 1 hour, no matter how many problems I can solve. In fact, even if I couldn't solve a single problem, I'll just add the notes कि भाई this is where I have came till now, and now I couldn't solve the problem. Next day, whenever I would come, I would solve that particular problem, right? So do DSA for 1 hour and you will be fine mostly. Which language is better depth in your opinion? Why, since we are doing web dev, it's always good to JS is really good language. I don't understand your question really. Okay, bhai, what do you mean by with in depth? It depends on what domain you are actually choosing. If you are in AI ML, Python is the language to go for. If you are in Web3 blockchain, you are good with Rust. You should know Rust and JS. If you want to go with web dev, JS is the language. That is the thing. Languages doesn't matter. If you are well versed in one language, you should be well versed with all the other languages. The only thing that changes is there are few concepts very specific to a particular language. Rust is very different language, but if you go with if you know Java and if you know Python, you should be fine switching any other language. You should be really fine switching any other language. There are few languages which have the few concepts which are not there in other languages. For example, promises are there which are specific to JavaScript, or multi-threading is there which are specific to only strictly typed languages, right? So these are the things. So languages, the depth of languages doesn't matter. What really matters is as you build more and more projects, you'll be getting to know how individual things are done. Don't use GPT, don't use AI tools when you are coding out. Use Google it out. What will happen is, basically I'll tell you, in fact in my company as well. Okay, let's not talk about my company, but in general, what will happen is, basically you are given a task, you go to AI, take it from there, put it in your code base, it works and you're good, right? But that should not happen. Why? Unless you are a very senior engineer, right? Why I'm saying that is because again, if I give you the same task for 10 times, you'll again spend that amount of time in, GPTing it out. And then if for some day, let's say if your code broke out, right, and then you'll be the worst fatality will happen to you, right? If it is in production and got broke out, you don't know how to fix it because you haven't spent time with your code, right? So write every line. You can use AI. If you don't understand a piece of code of snippet, take that and ask AI to break it out for you. Write the individual snippets, play around. When in doubt, code it out, right? The good phrase. When in doubt, code it out. So if you don't know anything, code it out yourself. Google it out, right? If you don't know something, how arrays work, how the functions of arrays work, go here. Arrays length in JS. Don't in this and in these small things, don't actually use GPT. This is my personal opinion, and I'll tell you what, got better in debugging the things compared to anyone else. Because आप जब 3 से 4 से 5 मरतबा कर देते वो चीज, now it is in your muscle memory. You understand everything. The fingers will automatically start typing for you. You don't need to actually GPT it out, right? That is the thing. All right. I'll see you most likely next week. Maybe on Friday or Saturday, I'll come to the college. Or uska next Friday or Saturday. We'll keep it this way. We'll from next week onwards, we'll upload offline videos, and then you guys just continue with your assignments. And if you don't have any doubt, we can have the live meetings, or we'll meet in person. Okay, does that work with everyone? All righty. Sure, sir. Nice to hear. Jazakallah Alim bhai. Are you going to organize a bootcamp in college? Yes, most likely. May not be in Ramadan. I'm not sure about it. हाँ, Ramadan में करना पड़ता most likely because we'll have exams after Ramadan. So again, you guys will be busy, right? So it's better to hold a boot camp in Ramadan. Let's see from there how it goes. Most likely, the most difficult bit, यहाँ से everything is easy until you get to React. React is very different. So I would want to hold the in-person meeting for React, so I can understand how the things are going, how's the pace, and I can organize things better, right? All right. Try to do assignments, code it out yourself. I'll share more assignments in the group or with Fatima, and discuss with your peers. Try to be around with the smart people, right? Because you're the average of the 5 people around you, right? Try to be around smart people. Code it out, code things a lot, right? Try to cover this thing. Start doing DSA from tomorrow onwards itself, right? Spend only 1 hour. You don't quantize with your time, not with how many problems you're solving. Even if you couldn't solve a single problem, just write the note why you couldn't solve and come back tomorrow and then try to solve it. All right, that's enough ranting, I guess. I'll see you guys maybe in the college, right? Bye bye.